share the screen. Right. So we had to start from here, that is functions of an operating system. In the previous class, we had seen different types of operating system, some of them being multi-programming, multitasking, multi-user operating systems, multi-processor operating systems, time-sharing systems, real-time systems, and so on. So now we will be basically seeing the functions of an operating system. There are basically three categories of the functions of an operating system: processor management, memory management, and input-output management. So we start with the very first, that is processor management, that is managing the CPU time. Whenever we say processor management, it will always refer to the CPU time, students. Okay, that is how, because CPU time is something which is a very important resource of your computer. So all processes which execute on the computer, they require CPU time. So an object program that needs to be executed. Any program which needs to be executed, it has to be executed by the processor, and hence CPU time is something which is an important resource of your computer. Always remember there are two very important resources of a computer. They are, one is your RAM and second is your CPU time. That is the time needed by a process to execute on the CPU, right? So these are the two very important resources of a computer. An operating system's main task is to decide how the CPU time can be divided amongst the various processes, right? So processor management forms a very important function of your operating system. Data to be processed by a program, resources needed by a program, status of process execution, that is what is the current status of execution of a particular program, management of the processor, process scheduling. These all things are done by the processor management part. Okay. Next is storage management. Keeps a log of memory usage, such as which part of the memory is currently in use. Not only this, but also bringing in jobs. When we say jobs, it is actually another word for processes, right? So bringing in jobs from the secondary storage into the RAM for execution. So in order to execute, all processes need to be in the RAM. So when to bring which job from the secondary storage, that is hard disk or floppy disk or magnetic tape drive or whichever secondary storage device is there, how to bring it into the RAM, when to bring it and when to let it out. Decides which process to load as soon as adequate memory is available for it. Because RAM is always in a very short amount, that is, it has a limited capacity. Hence, and there are many multiple processes. So, the operating system has to decide in a proper way that which process has to leave the memory at a time and which other process can be brought into the memory. Allocates or deallocates the memory space as per requirement. Memory plays a central role in computer systems because it is something which bridges the gap between CPU and the input-output system. Also, next is device management. It is also a very important function of your operating system. The operating system manages all the devices. Okay, and every device has its own driver, as you can see in this slide, that every device has its own driver. Printer will have its own driver, which is a software which forms an interface between the computer and the driver. Sorry, computer and the actual device. Right. because we want to use the printer. Hence, how will it work? Without any device driver, it won't work. So that is why, and device driver is also a very important system software, students, as we had discussed before. Then you can see over here graphics card driver, and it is attached to the graphic card. So this way we have driver for all the components. We have a driver for monitor, for keyboard, for your pen drive, for your printer, for your plotter, for your speaker, any device which is attached to your computer, it uses a driver for working. So managing all the devices, and these drivers, they need the help of the operating system. The operating system receives commands from the user. Like if suppose I want to print a document, so I will be just pressing the button for giving the print command. Now what do you think happens? Operating system receives this command. Of course we are giving this command through an application software, but then who receives the command for printing? Operating system receives. It will then give the instructions to the printer driver. Then the printer driver will make the printer work. This is how the work is done. We have file management, creates and deletes files, creates and deletes directories. That is, you want to create file, you create a new file, you open a file, you create folders, you delete folders, you rename folders. Okay, so all these things which you do related on the file explorer window, placing creating another folder within another folder, moving folders, moving files, all these things which you do, they require the help of the operating system. So all these things you can see over here, they come under file management, right? So three basic things, that is processor management, memory management, and input output management. This file management comes under input output management only. Some commonly used operating systems, as you can see over here in this image, you will be able to see various different types of operating systems. Okay, so and these all which you see, Red Hat, Fedora, CentOS, Debian, Ubuntu, Mint, these all are various distributions of Linux. Okay, Arch Linux, Slackware, Mandriva, okay, FreeBSD, and these are all what different types of operating systems, different, I mean, versions or distributions of Linux. This There is one operating system, one version of Linux which has been customized for Indian people, that is BOS, Bharat Operating System Solutions, and this has been moderated and redistributed by CDAC, Pune. Features of Windows operating system. So let us see some features of Windows OS. It is user friendly, supports office tools, provides PC gaming support, periodically updated, maximum hardware and software support, backward compatible, supports external hardware quickly. So all these things you already are familiar with. Some features of Windows 10 can run on conventional desktop as well as smartphone with the same settings and features. Students, this don't go with the page number, right? Only look at the description. So what all things are there? You already know. Let's come to functions of an operating system. Yes, so we come to this part, processor management. Now, as I said, processor management means managing all the processes. Firstly, managing the processor, that is CPU time, and scheduling different processes to run on the CPU such that every process gets a chance to execute, right? This is also known as CPU scheduling, or it is also known as job scheduling, right? We use these two terms interchangeably. Why am I not able to type today? Okay. Job scheduling or CPU scheduling, that is managing the CPU time efficiently between, or sorry, various processes, so that all processes get a chance to execute on the CPU. Multi-programming improves the overall efficiency of a computer system. Let me explain this part now, students. What is, we already know what is multi-programming, right? That is handling more than one programs at the same time. Why is multi-programming used? What is the reason behind using multi-programming? The thing is, I'll give you a small example. Suppose you are typing a letter, right? You're typing a letter and you are very slow in typing. So when you type a letter and you just look for another, you are searching for another letter. In the meantime, what is the system doing? It is just staying idle over there. Even the very fast, a person who types very fast, even a person who types 40 to 50 words per minute, even that is considered to be very slow when it comes to a CPU speed, right? So whenever it is like you are typing something within that time interval, CPU can execute other tasks also, right? So the main idea is maximum utilization of CPU time. Why? Because if your system, if your CPU is idle, then it wastes electricity, right? It is wasting electricity and unnecessarily your system keeps getting hotter. So either you switch the computer off or you make it execute more than one task such that your CPU time is not wasted, because CPU time is a very important resource. It's a very important resource for your computer. So it should not be wasted. Now you cannot uh, completely eliminate the wastage of CPU time. Some or the other CPU time will be wasted. That is, some or the other time CPU will remain idle, but you can definitely bring that down. You can bring that wastage down. So the only solution to this problem is multi-programming. That is, make your CPU execute more than one task at a time. As many tasks can fit into RAM, that many tasks can be executed by the CPU. The CPU can execute one task, move on to while this particular task, as I had explained before, that input output statements are also part of a program. So suppose the CPU encounters input or output statements in a program, it can quickly switch over to the other program, okay? And in the meantime, this program will complete its input and output, and the other program can execute, right? So this way we can keep the CPU busy and we can also increase the overall efficiency of the operating system. So the operating system which provides efficient job scheduling, which brings down the wastage of CPU time to a nominal, that is considered the best type of operating system. Benefits of multi-programming: increased CPU utilization, higher total job throughput. Job throughput means total number of jobs executed per unit time. Per unit time means in 1 second how many jobs are executed, in 1 microsecond how many jobs are executed, right? So the more is the number of jobs executed per unit time, you say that the throughput is high. So we always look for such operating systems which increase the job throughput. Throughput is the total number of jobs completed divided by the total time taken to complete the jobs. Students, we are not going to do any numerical as such in this chapter. It is just for your knowledge. Okay, it's just a theory which you have to study. Job scheduling. Now, we know we had already seen, we have got a small idea about job scheduling. If you go deep into job scheduling, it is actually a whole chapter, right, in engineering. But and it consists of a lot of different numericals and stuff, but we are not going into that. We will just look into it, that what exactly is job scheduling. You can see something like priority to jobs, right? There are different multiple jobs in a job pool, that is there are, or we can say programs which are saved on the secondary storage. By secondary storage, normally I will mean the hard disk, right? So there are multiple jobs which are saved on your hard disk. That is known as a job pool. That is a pool of jobs, right? Now from there, your operating system chooses some jobs and brings them into the RAM. And this selection of jobs is done based on what? Done based on what? The priority of the job. What is the priority of the job? Okay, so the priority is fixed according to some algorithms, and we will be seeing that in a short while. Process is a set of instructions, we have already seen that. And how is the priority fixed? Some operating systems might use a first come first serve basis, means the job which arrives first, that is the first one to be served. For example, there are, take the case of an internet cafe which has 5 computers, right? 5 computers are there. I'm just going to provide those over here. PC1, then you have PC2, PC3, PC4, and PC5, right? 5 computers are there, and a printer is attached to PC5, right? So 4 computers, all of them are connected through a local area network, and PC5 is connected to the printer. So I'll just join these like this to show that they are connected to each other. Got it? So now there are different users who are sitting on each of these PCs. Suppose the user who was sitting at PC2 gives a print request. So what comes up over here? PC2. Okay, so PC2's request first comes and gets into the print queue, right? Then PC4, the person who is sitting at PC4 wants to print a spreadsheet. So the next job is from PC4. The next one is from PC1. Next one is from PC5. Then PC2 again gives another print request. And last of all, we have PC3. So this is a queue. What you can see over here is a queue, a device queue, right? And it follows which method? First come first serve. That is the job which appears, a print request which arrives first will be executed first. So likewise, in your system also, in your for your computers also, for your operating system, how operating system decides which job to execute first, it sometimes follows a first come first serve rule. That is the uh, process which will be requested first for execution will be the first one to come into the RAM and then execute using the CPU time. Sometimes it is the other one, that is shortest job next. Firstly, suppose we have 3 jobs. Out of them, the operating system will choose the one which has the shortest need for CPU time, or which is a very short job, which will require less CPU time to execute. And then again the next shortest, then the next shortest, and so on. So this way there are multiple ways of deciding how various processes will execute on the CPU. So before we move into that, we are going to first study this very important diagram, which is known as the process state diagram, right? So look at this very carefully. These ellipses which you see over here, they are what? They are the process states. Please make a note of it somewhere. The ellipse which you see represent the process state. That is a particular state where at which the process is currently right now. Right? अभी process कौन से state में है? Whether it is a newly created process or it is ready for execution. So new is what? A process which has been just created. A programmer creates a program. You created a program, you saved it and you kept it. So this program, and it is picked up, you give the command for execution, it is picked up by the operating system, it comes into the RAM and it is waiting in the RAM for execution. So this is what? A new state. That is, the process is in which state? It's a new state. Sorry, I just made a mistake. Process is created, saved and kept in the secondary storage. That is new. Now you give the command for running the program, so it gets admitted into your RAM and it is ready for execution. When it's admitted means when it is picked up by the operating system, it is brought into the RAM. Now it is ready for execution. Okay, means it is waiting in the RAM to be executed by the CPU. From here, it will go into the next stage, that is running stage. That is the stage where the program is in execution. जब वो program execute होना शुरू हो जाता है तो what is the state? Running state. Now where can the process, which state can the process go? There are three states in which the process can go next. Either it will complete its execution and go to the terminated stage and exit the RAM. Okay, or if in case there is any IO request, that is any input or output statements are encountered, then obviously the processor will not be executing this process. Okay, it will start executing the next process. So this process, this current process will be going into the waiting state. Why? Because of an IO or any event wait, it goes into the waiting stage. Now from waiting stage, it will be sent to the required IO device. For example, if a process comes under a statement where it asks for an input from the user, right? Like A equals, I write here, int input, enter a value. So I write this. So what will happen? A int input, enter a value. It means what? We are waiting at this particular point. The system waits for an input from the user. यहाँ तो processor भी कुछ नहीं कर सकता. Why? Until and unless the user gives any input, how will the processor proceed towards the next statement? So this is a point where the CPU has to suspend the execution of this program and move on to the next one. Now when this statement is there, what device will be needed? Obviously keyboard will be needed here. What is keyboard? It's an input device. So it will go to the keyboard device queue. Every device has its own queue, right? Like I showed you in the previous slide that the printer has its queue, right? And so this keyboard will have its own queue and this process will go into that device queue waiting for the IOCS, the input output control system, to execute the statement, right? So it goes into the waiting state, and while it is being executed there in the device queue, and once it completes, that is user has entered the value, IO or event is completed, and it again comes back to RAM. It is already in the RAM. It is now ready to be executed by the CPU now. Okay. Let's do this once again. From ready to running state, that is process is executing right now. Either it will complete and it will terminate the system, or if there are any input or output statements which require CPU or monitor or printer, it will go into the waiting state. There it will complete its task, and once it is completed, it again comes back to the ready state. So these were two states. What is the third step? Process is running, and suppose there is an unknown error which occurs, and your process stops executing in between. It could be any syntactical error, or it could be any logical error within the program, or it might be a divide by zero error. Students, division by zero error, it's a very common error, okay, on all digital devices, whether your calculator or your computer. So when you try to divide any number by zero, we in mathematics we say it is infinity, right? So your system, your device, your digital computer doesn't understand infinity. It will consider this as error. Even in your calculator, if you try to divide any number by zero, it will give E, the letter E, which shows a division by zero error. So suppose there is an error in your program stops executing, or there is some kind of a problem which arises. So your CPU will generate an interrupt signal. It will notify an interrupt signal saying that something went wrong in the program. Okay. Now it's up to the user what to do with it. So if the user still decides that, okay, I'm going to run it once again and check, it will again go back to the ready state, right? Again, it goes to the running state, and now it finally user again gets that interrupt. It again goes to the ready state, running state. Now if the user can decide whether to continue its execution or to abort, that is to close it or remove it right now. Okay, and because he might have to look into the program to find out the error, then it goes into the terminated stage. There is something written here, scheduler dispatch. Students, you will understand the meaning of this scheduler dispatch in the coming slides. Actually, this picking up uh, jobs from the job pool, bringing them into the RAM, okay, and then from the RAM process for being executed by the CPU, right? So this is done by a part of your operating system which is known as scheduler. It is a small subroutine within subroutine of operating system. Subroutine means a small part of the operating system which handles all types of job scheduling, right? So we will be learning about types of schedulers also. So right now I'm not going into that. We are moving one at a time. So let's summarize this. A process is just created, okay, and saved in your secondary storage. So what is the state? New. It is brought into the RAM. It comes into the ready state. Now from here, the scheduler allocates CPU. It comes into the running or executing stage. Now from here, suppose it completes its execution, it will go into the terminate state. Or if there is any error, interrupt will be generated. It again comes back to the ready state. Okay. Again, it might execute. It might come across input output statements. So it goes into the waiting stage. Once input output is completed, again it comes back to the ready stage. And then again it will execute. And now when it completes its execution, it will go to the terminated state by exiting the system. So this is a very important diagram, students. Process state diagram. I will be giving this in your, it is already there in the notes, right? So it might come as a 2-mark question. You will be asked to draw the diagram, or sometimes draw the diagram and explain the various states, that is new, ready, running, terminated, and waiting. And one thing I would like to tell you, students, do not change the names. It should not be like newly created. No, new है तो new ही होना चाहिए, running है तो running होना चाहिए. It should not be executing. Okay, and terminated, halted ऐसा नहीं चाहिए. It should be terminated, right? So please stick to these names only. This particular diagram you have to by heart. Got it? Next is PCB, that is process control block. So what is PCB? A process control block is also called a task controlling block, process table, task struct, or switch frame. These are multiple names for a process control block. It is a data structure in the operating system kernel containing the information needed to manage a particular process. Operating system kernel means, now operating system is a huge software. It is not that all the time the entire operating system stays in the memory. It is only a part of the operating system known as the kernel which stays in the memory. Kernel means the core. Okay. Uh, Kernel is a term which comes from like kernel of a seed, means the inner part of a seed, which actually contains the edible nut. Okay. So this kernel is was the important part, the center, the core of the operating system that stays in the memory, and other modules or other functions of operating systems, they are called as and when needed, right? So this process control block is a type of a table which contains certain information about each process. The PCB is the manifestation of a process in an operating system, and it looks like this. Everybody just pay attention to this part right now where I'm circling. Okay, I'm just going to highlight this part. You have to pay attention to this part. Okay, this part right now. So what all things are there? Firstly, it contains a pointer, right? This pointer contains the address of the first instruction of the process in the memory, right? It, you will find it in detailed notes. This pointer consists of the address of the first instruction, means in the memory where this process starts from. Second is process state, whether process is in the new state, ready state, running state, or terminated state. The process state diagram which just saw in the previous slide. Process number. What every process is allocated a process number, a unique number which acts as an identifier for the process. Okay, means now we all know, you all have your Aadhaar number. What is the task of the Aadhaar number? Can anyone tell me what is the utility of having an Aadhaar number? Nowadays, we need an Aadhaar number.
Unique identity of a person. Identify person.
Yes, ma'am, it is identification. For identification, it is.
One at a time, dear. Yes. Who was this? I think it was. Just raise your hands. Yes, Agni.
Ma'am, it is used to identify a person, to verify the identity.
Verify the identity of a person. Very good. Yes, Khushi Chauhan.
Yes, ma'am, same. It is used for identification.
Jaya Vishwakarma. Yes, you want to say something?
No, ma'am, the same, that it's the unique identity for a person.
Unique ID. Yes, it's a unique ID. It's a unique identification number which is given to every person. So here also the process number uniquely identifies every process, every job. If you remember last year when we were studying Access, in that we were studying about database and tables, right? So in tables we used to have a particular column known as the primary key. Do you remember that? Yes. Primary key was used for uniquely identifying all the records. Means every record will have its unique primary key. So similarly, processes also are identified by the process number. The operating system needs this because there are more than one processes running on the CPU. Next, we come to program counter. Who will tell me about program counter? We have studied this multiple times. Can anybody tell me about program counter? Yes, we have studied many times. Yes, Savni.
Ma'am, it is a register in the CPU which looks after the address of programs, something related.
Address of programs, answer is kind of vague, Agni. Okay.
Yes.
See, you have to be very specific over here. Rohit, can you try? What do you mean by a program counter?
Yes, ma'am.
Hmm.
Ma'am, program counter is a register in a computer process that contains address and location instruction being executed.
Address. Yes, yes. It contains the address of the next instruction which is to be executed. You had studied the fetch, decode, and execute cycle, where the control unit fetches one instruction. How does it know which instruction? It comes to know from that using the program counter for that process. How the CPU, many of the questions will be answered here. How the CPU keeps track, or how CPU is just a hardware device. Who is controlling the CPU? The operating system. How does the operating system keep track of various processes? It is through this PCB. As you can see over here, this is a process table which contains process IDs, that is various IDs and PCBs to different process. Like process 1, this is the PCB, process 2, this is the PCB, process N, this is the PCB. So this is how the operating system keeps track of the different processes. So program counter, the moment one instruction has been fetched for execution, program counter automatically increments by 1. And now it points to the next instruction. Next is registers. We already know what are registers. They are very high speed memory cells which are used by your CPU for executing a particular process. So which of the registers are being used by the current process, whether it is using a control register or a data register or an accumulator or any register which it is using other than the program counter, that is specified here. Next, memory limits. Memory limits is somehow related to this first one, that is pointer. Pointer stores the address of the first instruction of the process in the memory. Memory limits is actually the size of the process. If I say pointer stores the address of first instruction, this process. And memory limits, it is the size of the process. If you add the pointer value to this memory limit, you will get what? The ending address of the process in the memory. कहाँ से start हो रहा है? So you first get the starting address, you add the size of the process and you get the ending address of the process, right? So this is used for getting the ending address means, and why memory limit? Such that in the memory, no process overlaps another process. Like if suppose this is a process which is stored, right? And it starts from say 100K, right? And it takes up 100K and hence its ending address is what? 200, right? Next process cannot start from here. Understood this? Next process cannot start from 190. This will be wrong. Understood? It has to start from 200 or anything after below 200 or before 100. So these memory limits are maintained to avoid any type of overlapping between the processes in the memory. Next is list of files. Now processes also use disk files, right? You will be coming across a chapter in class 12 known as file handling. I think time is over. It's time for your next class, students. So I'll just conclude with this. How many processes your process is currently using? So that is mentioned by the list of open files. There are multiple other information also that are stored in a PCB of a process. So with this, I end today's class, students.